the glen one Easter morn to a city fair rode I.
The Polished Trunk by Reenagh McCall. Act 1, Scene 1. Annie opens an old beige flip-locked suitcase. The open suitcase rests on a single bed, surrounded by men's suits and shirts. An ottoman sits at the foot of the bed. An old mahogany wardrobe sits to the left, with the door open, in front of which a mahogany dressing table with various bottles, a framed photo, a hairbrush, clothes brush, and snuff tip.
He was dapper in a waistcoated suit and James Joyce glasses. He did 20 press-ups every morning. When he was well. When he wasn't, sometimes I could hear him being quietened as my dad carried him to bed.
Sounds of footsteps going upstairs and the wailing lament of an old man. Annie sits on the bed, clutching his shirt.
Other times, he'd scream at night. Shell shock from memories of mustard gas and blasts re-exploding through his nervous system.
Annie folds his shirt into the case, goes to the end of the bed and picks up a pair of highly polished shoes.
It's a long way to Tipperary. It's a long way to go. It's a long
Sometimes I'd shine his shoes for him. I dip the bristles into the tacky substance and playfully paint his shoes in dabs of black. And after the brush had spread the black, thinned polish in circles across the leather, I'd repeat the action carefully, clockwise with the buff clogged. It was both a game for me and a way of making him proud.
But my heart lies there.
Annie places the shoes inside of the suitcase.
He had this trunk in his bedroom. It was heavy, olive green with silver metal corners. Polished, like the shoes I'd shine for him. On days after episodes, shoes would rest unpolished and press-ups would be forgotten in favour for a hot bowl of coddle. And the trunk would come out. A living storybook of bloody adventures. And I would sit agog, listening to him regale me with stories of his travels. Too much macabre for the ears of an 8-year-old. How he'd run away from home and enrolled in the army at 14, lying about his age to get away from Mr. Murray, his stepdad, and found himself on night duty in the marshes of South Africa during the Boer War. Oh, tell me more, Grandad.
I was keeping watch as the men slept, right? And there was me and another chap. I'd never seen a night so black. I couldn't see a thing in the darkness. I'd start to smoke. It was something to hold on to in the fear. But then I heard a scream. Loud at first and fading at intervals, stopping and starting, coming from the swamp. I raced across the uneven terrain to the water where I saw the other century entangled in a death throw. I stood on the bank taking aim, but it was tantamount to hitting a grotesque hurdy-gurdy. So I disengaged and stood, impotent and ineffectual, watching as he was dragged under by the Nile crocodile. I ran towards camp, but as I did, the unearthly moans of ghosts rose from the ground. I looked down, waiting to see the spirits rising up to meet me. But it was worse. Below my feet, right below them, lay the corpses of men who had died in battle. Their moans, the gas escaping from their bloated bodies, and with each step I took another ghostly gasp.
Annie flicks through an old hardback copy of Dean Swift's Gulliver's Travels.
Grandad was prone to folklore, creating it and believing it. So sometimes you'd have to take what he said with a pinch of salt. He said that you could tell when his... That said, you could tell when his deathly serious. He'd walk us round daisy chains in the park for fear of stepping on fairy rings. He'd swore he'd met the fairy king at one point. And given his luck, it wouldn't have surprised me if he'd caught him. It might have been the drink, though.
And he closes the book and puts it in the suitcase.
Later he told me on a serious note, he had never felt so close to the boogeyman as on that murderous night in South Africa. When everything seemed poised to kill and reach back from the grave to pull another unsuspecting fellow in. Well, other than on a Halloween night many years earlier with his cousin Joe.
And he picks a photo of two young men. They are arm in arm. One is about 21, the other about 16.
He always paused a moment when he mentioned Joe's name. Was it reverence or doubt? I could never tell. Though the boogeyman would come up again if the occasion called for it.
Go to bed now, quick, before the boogeyman gets you.
Uncle Joe and Grandad were inseparable. Some years his junior. Wherever Grandad went, Joe followed. They shared an affinity which surpassed how they'd been raised and the influence of their fathers, or lack thereof. As happens in all marriages, mothers' beliefs mingled with the husbands until their truths become half-truths and new shared truths. So when his stepdad made it clear that Grandad wasn't welcome back when he returned from the war, his mother hadn't argued. Instead, Carol, Joe's mum, took him in. At 17, he was still a boy, but he seemed like a hero to Joe. And Grandad, missing his own family, took that 12-year-old under his wing. Joe's dad, Padraig, was a Fenian from the north. He told stories of romantic, mythical characters and battles victorious. Without a paternal reference of his own, Grandad would listen quietly. Somewhere in no man's land between his own experiences of British Army father figures and legends of Cuchulainn and Niall of the 9 hostages, spurring on a nationalist pride. Scene 3. Carolyn's kitchen. The calendar reads September 1913. There's a long wooden table, mismatched chairs and a wooden dresser lined with mismatched crockery. Carolyn opens the door and Grace comes in carrying 2 pheasants and a rifle.
What in Jesus' name, Grace? Again? Are the 2 you left me yesterday in the oven? Have you come into somebody I don't know about?
No, I shot him. Me. On me own. Not a man in sight.
Jesus. You're lucky you weren't shot by some farmer.
Why? They're wild. It's not like I'm poaching. Been good now. I'm trying to keep up regular practice. Not bad for a townie, right?
Zorro, eat your heart out. Since when can you shoot a gun?
A Maggie Moore down the road caught up with me a few weeks ago after Mass and said if I wanted to join her in the Colony for some fresh air. So I turned up wearing my best picnic gear. And they're all there in tunics and galoshes and a pony and trap filled with weapons.
Joking.
Deadly serious. So I can't look like I'm terrified out of me wits, which of course I am. So I go along with it and they teach me how to shoot and it turns out it's not that hard. As Maggie said, if you can thread a needle and lift a toddler, you've the eye for the aim and the strength for the trigger.
But what happened with this?
Well, it's a bit of the suffragettes and a bit of Countess Markovich. There was talk of taking up arms if Home Rule doesn't pass. She didn't hear that from me.
Jesus. So, what about all the men in all this?
Oh, it's all women. Coming the man, they're calling themselves. They said the men are happy about it in case they need backup. I don't think they're all that bothered what they think.
Everywhere I go, I hear her name. She seems to be popping up. Countess Markovitz. Even Joe's going to her Fina Scouts. Off with his hurl every morning. Don't tell me she's into hurling as well.
It wouldn't surprise me. Hurling in her ball gown. See, she could do it too. Anyway, I've put my training to good use. Looks like we'll be eating like the nobility ourselves.
Carolyn takes the dead birds out to the pantry.
Yeah, I suppose you'll be staying for dinner, so you might as well.
I might as well. Rose will only be back here with Joe anyway. Oh, do you miss the times that you were their ward? Heard all as they were to mind.
Wouldn't spot 'em.
What do you think your porg will say about the pheasants?
They'll be dead before he gets here, and he won't notice what he's eating as long as there's spuds on the plate.
Scene 3. Willie and John chat outside Carolyn's. A whistle blows in the distance. John strikes a match and lights a cigarette.
Weird news of a lockout in Dublin. Seems like the men in the tramway office received their notice to quit the transport union, and their services are no longer required.
Thought we were done with that years ago.
2 years, John. It's not that long. Do you think them mosquitoes down in Africa did a bit more harm to your brain than was first thought? I thought that malaria has that effect.
Yeah, I'd like to see how well you'd fare on a battlefield.
At least we won't have to deal with the swarms of flies if we do go to battle on Irish side.
Where there's dead bodies, there's flies.
Yeah, but there'll be Irish flies. None of them mosquitoes.
I don't know, but I'm so keen to fight, it's brutal. And seeing the light go from someone's eyes and other human beings makes you think. No. I mean, everyone always thinks they're fighting on the right side or they wouldn't do it. Do you ever wonder if anyone's right?
Oh, I know who's right and who needs to have their lights put up. The tramway bosses for the start, and that fella Murphy at the Dublin Employers Federation.
You're not proposing killing someone.
No. Me? No, I'm talking lights out in the true sense of the word.
Yeah, I'd like to see that with your boxing skills.
Seriously though, I heard tell that they're called in the workers from England to take the lads' jobs while their families starve.
Oh, that's not right. But that's a desperate situation.
We need to have rights recognised by law.
Please God, we'll have them soon enough. It looks like Redmond is going to get home rule over the line.
Is that enough?
They enter Carolyn's kitchen.
Is what enough?
What Redmond's up to in Parliament?
Willie, you know the rule. No politics at the dinner table. That is, if you're staying.
Is there enough to go around?
You know by now, Willie, there's always a sup for the cat.
John spots the rifle by the door.
Is there something I should know about Auntie Carolyn?
Oh no, that's mine. Just used it to shoot the dinner.
I'm not sure if you're kidding.
It's Grace O'Malley you should be calling her.
Rose and Joe come down the stairs.
Would you look at the two lovebirds?
Oh, we're not.
No, she won't have me.
Never mind, Joe. You're young yet. You've your whole life ahead of you to meet girls.
But Rose, you're the only one I want.
Let's not get ahead of yourself, Joe. Rose is still a girl, and she's my girl, for the time being at least. So you better give her a wide berth if it's more than friendship you're after. Or I get Maggie on you.
She points to her rifle.
That goes for the two of you too.
Rose, are you mad, Grace? Sure, she's only a child. How old are you now, Rose? 14?
I'm 17. Thanks for noticing my last 3 birthdays. You were my age when you came back from war. Still think I'm a child.
Well, you put it like that.
Well, I think you've grown into a lovely young lady, Rose. Very fetching. I don't blame you a bit, Joe.
Grace picks up the carving knife.
3 blind mice, that's what you'll be with no tails between your legs and fire any more out of the two of you.
The door opens and Porritt comes in.
Talk of what nature?
You don't want to know.
He notices the rifle.
What in God's name?
He picks it up and swings it round absent-mindedly. People duck in succession. John jumps up and takes it from him, cracks it, and leans it back against the corner by the door.
John was just giving us a demonstration. Come and wash up, Porritt. Dinner's ready.
Porritt goes to the sink and washes his hands. Carolyn winks at John. Porritt comes to the table and removes the carving knife from Grace's hands.
I think that's the head of the household's job. Nice to see you all here again. Your family's never missed you. I know I would. If I ever got the chance.
Harry,
So, Rose, have you and Joe, have you put Joe out of his misery and agreed to go to the dance with him yet?
Porrick grins. As he carves, he hits a pellet.
What? This? Is this a bullet?
I don't know. I'll have to ask Mr. Comerford next time I'm down at Butcher.
You might as well give me that bit. There's no point in living without Rose.
Rose stands up incensed.
I'm a bit nauseous. I think I need some air.
Rose leaves. Joe looks to Porrick for permission, and he nods in approval to follow her. Scene 4. The sound of a gate creaking, the wind in the leaves and waves breaking.
Rose,
Joe, I just want to be alone, please.
there was a young girl found dead at the Raven not that long ago, covered by a blanket.
Joe, what a thing to say to me. You're trying to make me nervous.
Sure, you've no need to be nervous when I'm with you.
Why is that?
I'll protect you. I've been training for it, at the Fintan.
With your hurl?
Don't underestimate a hurl. It's a deadly weapon in the right hands. Anyway, we'll be using guns soon. They're going to show us how to load and reload them and target shoot and all.
I don't like the sound of that, Joe.
Joe puts his arm around her.
You concerned for my safety?
Rose wriggles out of it. Joe grabs her shoulders. She cries out and almost stumbles. Joe steadies her, instinctively kisses her. She lets him, but then pulls away.
Quicksand. You could have gone into it. That's why I stopped you.
Saving with your lips, did you? Was that another thing the Fiend there teaching you?
Rose marches away. Scene 5. Carlin's kitchen. The calendar reads September 1914. Porrick, Joe, and Willie sit over a cup of tea, reading the Irish Volunteer newspaper. Rose sits inconspicuously on the stairs, listening.
Looks like we're going to war, boys. The volunteers are enlisting in their thousands. No more strikes can be held by the unions for fair pay once the war's underway. I'm afraid it's backwards we're going.
When it's over, the House of Lords will finally pass Home Rule.
It's naive to think home rule is high on the agenda. There's half the world involved in this war. The Germans, allied with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, want to teach Serbia a lesson for killing the Archduke. And the French are allied with the Russians, who have to defend Serbia. And poor neutral Belgium, stuck in the middle between France and Germany. And they're allied with the British Empire. And I mean every fourth person on Earth is under British control.
If the British Empire is that strong, how can they fail?
Well, we're on the other side now. Their heads are turned to the east.
John, who's been quietly standing by the door, clears his throat.
That's a bit cynical, Willie. You not think it's our duty to protect Belgium? But what if the Germans come here next?
I welcome them with open arms.
So you're willing to swap the English language for a German one? You'd rather take a chance to be under a new ruler than see out the home rule that's due to pass through the House of Lords on its next attempt.
That's war, John. They dragged our heels for long enough. This is our best chance to finally get out from under England's control.
Carolyn and Grace arrive with 2 rifles.
What are you doing home?
The Murtis calf was delivered early, so I thought I'd come home to me wife. Luckily, I've had Willie and Joe to keep me company when Pat Yarrett and Billy the Kid were off shooting.
So, if I used to say that I signed up to there, would that make us enemy, Willie? After all these years?
John, you've enlisted. Why didn't you say something?
John, why didn't you tell me?
Why would he have told you?
John, son, why?
It's the right thing to do. I can't look on as innocent Belgians are slaughtered, and I can't leave Ireland unprotected from the German threat. You know what, if you can't understand that, I'm sorry.
I know you have a good heart, son, and good intentions, but you have to be the first to go.
I've been called up. I have the experience. I can train the new lads. Try and stop some of them from losing their lives.
So be it. But John, you know I can't have a red coat in my home. I told you the first time you came that you'd have to leave that behind if you wanted to come and live here.
No, Porrick. No hard feelings.
But he's my sister's child, Porrick. You can't throw him out.
No, it's fine, Auntie Carolyn. I have to report for duty in Dublin in a week, and then I'll be off to the Curragh for training. I'll just stay in a boarding house in the meantime, and when I'm on leave.
You do no such a thing. Myself and Rose have to go to Dublin this week. I was going to tell you, Carolyn, my dad's taken a turn for the worse and I'm needed at home. John can stay with us when he's on leave in Dublin.
Well, I think what you're doing is brave. Just be careful, yeah? And stay in touch so I know how you're doing, will you?
Yes. Write to us, son, and let us know how you're doing and where to write back to you.
Carolyn hugs John.
We'll write every week so you don't have to feel alone.
Porrick. Willie, have you nothing to say to your closest friend?
Don't come back, John. It'll be better for everyone.
How could you say that? Get out!
Don't, Joe.
Why? Little brother look after them for me.
John leaves.
John!
Rose runs out after him.
I'd better be saying me goodbyes as well, so... Carolyn, you're my dearest friend. Don't forget that. As for the rest of you, you know she can use that rifle now and she's not a bad shot, so I'd stay in line if I were you. Bye all. Carolyn, you're welcome to visit any time. You too, Joe, don't be a stranger. Rose will be lost without you.
Rose catches up with John.
Are you really going to go without saying goodbye?
What do you want me to say?
I want you to say that you love me.
She kisses him and his arms fall around her. Joe comes out through the door and sees the embrace from the distance. He goes back inside. Scene 6. Grace's house on North Circular Road, Dublin. Rose's bedroom.
She'll be back soon, come on.
Oh, what about your granddad? Won't he hear us?
Granddad!
Shush, will you?
John fumbles around with his trousers and lifts Rose's petticoat over her head. She flings it back down and sits up on the bed, doll-like.
If you don't try to clamouse me with a bit of romance, you can forget all about it.
How do you know so much at your age?
I know what I want.
I know what I want to.
So, what you want?
I want to be your husband, Rose. I want to marry you and grow old with you. But first, I want to kiss your foul mouth, and then...
And then?
Scene 7.
Rose would see John off at the end of the week. Grace and she standing side by side on the docks as the Irish regiment sailed away to waving crowds and fanfare. Men packed into ships, desperately trying to catch one last glimpse of their loved ones. The men landed in a selection of hellish destinations, positioned front and centre of each new assault. There's dried blood still on the end of his bayonet from the impaled body of a Turkic Gallipoli. The Dardanelles, he called it. It toppled into the Aegean Sea like the soldiers it hosted. The Irish and the Australians fighting, dying, side by side. Stirrups. Stirrups from an Anzac horse he rode in retreat. The Australians commemorated their dead. But Irish deaths were unmarked and unremarked about here. Their bodies lost and tombs forgotten. Perhaps for the better. Never to see the sacrifice they made was futile. 60 years later, Granddad's night terrors would still be peppered with memories from the Balkans. calendar reads September 1915. Carolyn's kitchen is empty. She tidies up copies of the Irish Volunteer newspapers, reading headline reports of casualties at Mons. Joe comes down the stairs wearing a heavy coat and a haversack slung over his shoulder.
Why is it they never seem to write anything about the Dardanelles? It's always France or Belgium.
I doubt they tell the truth anyway. I guess they need to keep morale up amongst the men and the new recruits.
Where are you off to?
Ma'am, I don't want you to worry, but the men need me to go to France to pick up artillery for the cause.
Ah, no, Joe, not you two. I think my heart will break.
I'm not gonna fight. I'm just the messenger. You need to tell them where to go and who to meet, that kind of thing. It's all to be kept a bit quiet though, so don't go telling them.
How would I tell Joe? Just promise me you'll look after yourself and trust your gut. You know right from wrong. Don't do anything that doesn't sit right. That's the best advice I can give you. Keep your head down and come back to me, son.
Don't worry, I'll keep me head down.
I got a letter from your cousin John. We could read it together?
I like that.
She opens an envelope. Dugout in the trenches, Gallipoli. John sits in his dugout. Sniper shots sting in the background.
Dearest Auntie Carolyn and Cousin Joe. It seems like an eternity since I was back in Wexford with you, but only yesterday since I was last on a battlefield. How swiftly it returns. As I've been through it before, the men call me here an old sweat, and the new recruits come to me advice on what to dodge. Collectively, we're known as the Pups, apart from some Trinity College pals who are known as the Toffs.
He rips the officer's stripes off his jacket.
They offered me an officer's position, but you'll be glad to hear that I declined, as NCOs are the first targeted, and I plan to make it home to you all. I feel more useful among the men regardless. Perhaps I can stop some young lad from making a fatal mistake. You can tell Grace that I have a short Lee Enfield rifle and 150 rounds in my ammunition pouches, and we're trained to fire 10 rounds in a mad minute. That's a lot of pheasant dinners.
John empties the bullet in the rifle spout into his helmet.
The trip aboard the gunship took us along the coast of Algeria, and we were docked in Malta for a day, but we didn't get to disembark until Alexandria, and we were all very happy to be off the ship and stretching our legs. We finally arrived at the Dardanelles, but still haven't reached our intended destination, but it's all very hush-hush. We should probably have guessed when we were handed out pith helmets that we were off to somewhere tropical. I've always hated these because if I lie down to shoot, the back hits my neck and tips forward over my eyes.
The food is fine though. Tins of bully beef, which tastes a bit like your corned beef, Auntie Carolyn, but with a bit more flavour.
Gee.
The latrines leave a lot to be desired, being just a communal makeshift log out in the open with a trench beneath. Joe, it suffices to say that the tin hut out the back of CBS seems a distant luxury in comparison. But helps to have the sand to fill in the cesspits and keep the flies at bay.
The lads go swimming when they can, so they can wash and cool off in the sea, soaking tired feet from ill-fitting boots and shoulders from the weight of heavy packs.
A passing soldier swipes the letter from John and starts to read.
For breakfast we eat biscuits and apricot jam. But don't fret, I won't be putting on too much weight, as there never seems to be quite enough to completely fill our stomach. Well, that's an understatement. My belly hasn't been full since we left the River Clyde. The weather is fine too. Hot, like the hottest summer's day imaginable. We're in a place called Mudros, overlooking the Aegean Sea. It would make a fine holiday spot if it weren't for the war. Come on. This sounds like a travel guide.
Yeah, fine. So what do you suggest that I write? Well, what are you telling yours? Christy got his leg half blown off, but he was the lucky one because he was the only one from his outfit to survive the landing. Or should I go into more detail? Tell them about the young lads crying for their mothers or the teens shot for cowardice.
No, but don't just paint a scene. Like we're wrapped in a windsheet or on Dollymount Strand.
I don't want them to worry.
They'll worry either way. It's impossible for people back home to comprehend what's happening here. Unless we tell them. If you don't break the silence here, where do you begin again when you get back?
Go on. No.
Carolyn holds up the letter to the light.
I can't read the rest. It's been blacked out.
The Dublins and the Munsters came ahead. They had heavy losses at B Beach. I heard the officers speak of hundreds dead on land, and one of the Dublins said
It was carnage. And he never even set foot on the beach. Never as much as fired their weapons. We sailed from Devonport to the Dardanelles all geared up, with the fife band of the Irish Fusiliers playing the wording of the Greene. By the time we landed at Suvla Bay, there was no fife band. Only one man remained, and a solitary pipe to play out our mournful tune. The chaplain gave us all absolution before we left. Maybe they knew we didn't have a hope. The Turks were waiting, hidden in a trench at the bottom of the cliff, not 10 yards from us. The blast of naval battleships pounding the fortress made no difference. The Turks just mowed us down with machine guns, platoon after platoon. 40 men per night, towed to shore with maybe 3 surviving. Men shot on gangways and barges, others drowned in the sea under the weight of 60-pound packs. Died with their comrades' blood. Those of us who made it ashore represented scarce a third of those who left the River Clyde.
I'm sorry not to have kinder news to report, but the men are in good spirits and there's a sense of camaraderie. Rest assured that I am, for now, safe and held up here with all manner of interesting chaps. French, English, Scots, Irish, the 10th, the Dublins and the Munsters, troops from Australia, New Zealand and Newfoundland, Gurkhas and Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims and Christians alike, and so different and all fighting for the same cause. The French Centenaries stand out in particular. They're so tall. They tower over the Irish lads. But they're generous with their wine, so that's not all bad. I want you to know that despite the hardships, I feel proud to be here, representing Ireland. I hope you are well. Cheerio for now. Love to all the family. And should you see her, give Mother my fondest regards.
John.
Well, that's a relief. I'm terrified every time I get one of his letters, you know. I'm just waiting to hear that he's wounded. I see the state of the lad's returning, limbs and eyes and ears missing, diving at sounds and shaking from the gas. I pray the same doesn't happen to him.
He sounds well enough. Seems like a bit of an adventure. What about Rose? Are you not going to tell John?
Grace asked me not to. Anyway, it's not my place, Joe.
I don't know what their problem is. If it was me, I'd want to know.
I know, Joe, but I have to respect their wishes. What do you suppose was censored?
Probably some location information or names of the officers. Maybe he was giving out about one of them.
That would be just like him. He sounded well, though, didn't he?
He did, man.
Scene 8. Joe and Willie offload arms into a wooden barrel.
You did well. See, they'll be asking to head over again soon enough. Did you have any issues?
No, wasn't too bad once I got to Calais on the coast. So I had to travel with the farmer on his cart, which took 4 days there and another 4 back. Couldn't understand a word at the beginning. By the end, we'd found a way to communicate, though. My French isn't bad at all now.
And you didn't see any fighting?
No, sir. I think that was all in Belgium.
So, what? It took you about a month, give or take.
About that. Maybe a bit more, because we had to lay low on occasion. Any idea what they'll be used for?
They just wanted to be sure that if home rule is challenged, that they have the means to defend it. Well, it's hard to know now that the war's on. Talk of getting on with it, but I just feel itchy. You know, they're getting itchy to take advantage of the opening, as they see.
But should we not wait and see? I mean, there's thousands after following Redmond's call to fight. Surely they'd feel betrayed.
I wouldn't worry about it. It's all only talk at the minute, you know. People love to shout their mouths off.
Coming around for dinner?
No. I have a bit to do. Away along with you, huh? Give my regards to Porrick. Tell him I said to keep fighting the good fight.
Scene 9, Carolyn's kitchen. The calendar reads February 1916. Carolyn comes into the kitchen, fishes in her coat pocket and takes out a letter. She is dressed in her nurse's apron over her clothes. Porrick sits at the table. Joe comes through the door.
Where is it you got to?
I was helping Willie out. He told me to give you his regards, Dad, to keep fighting the good fight.
He's a good lad.
I hope you're not doing anything illegal. God. Talking about fighting, our letter finally arrived from John. I was waiting until you got in to open it.
Well, that's my appetite gone.
Do you not want to hear how he's getting on?
He made his choice when he walked out the door. And they won't hear any more about it.
Porrick takes his paper and goes to the chair. He taps his pipe off the side of the arm, filling it with tobacco and pressing it with his thumb. He lights it, opens the broadsheet, and puts his feet up on the stool.
Go on, man. Read it.
Carolyn walks back to the table, opens the envelope.
Dearest Auntie Carolyn and Joe.
Joe, John sits on some driftwood, fully dressed in a full-length army coat. He leans on his army pack as he writes.
Thank you for your letter. It was very welcome. I'm very pleased to hear that you've thrown yourself feet first into the medical profession. When I read the Common the Man were running a first aid course, I thought, no better woman, given the deftness with which you can slaughter a spring lamb. If any of the men are unfortunate enough to need an amputation, I'm sure that they'll get a clean cut at your hand. I'm also not in the least bit surprised that Grace has found work in the munitions factory in Dublin, though I'm not sure to know what they have in store. I thought that dear Rose might have joined her at a canary girl. At first I wondered if it was to save her complexion that she hadn't. But when he told me that she had to be at home to help her granddad, it made sense. Haven't heard from them since I left, so I do hope all is well with them. Can you please tell Rose that I've signed up to have an allotment taken from my wages so that she can get the separation allowance that I hope will see her through until we can marry on my return. Please do give them my sincerest regards if you should speak.
Ah, you poor dolt. Of course I will, hon. I'm sorry if the delay in my response has caused you both distress, but times have been more desperate than any words on paper could recount. The summer months were brutal, so hot that you were burnt brown by the sun and eaten alive by big black and green flies.
Black swarming masses of flies hatching from bloated, unburied bodies. You dare not inter for fear of running foul of a sniper and adding to the fight yourself. Flies hatching from dead bodies by the trenches, then landing on cuts and corpses in your mouth when you eat. They issued us fly nets to put over our faces to eat. We put our biscuit and jam under its cover and tighten the string to keep the flies out, but some get in regardless and are spread into the jam. We're so hungry, we have no choice to eat but to eat it all, you know. And all the time the flies are swarming over the mask, black and thick with them it is, so you can't see out.
Dear Jesus.
Makes you glad of our bad weather.
Well, life in the trenches hasn't been easy either. The Terrain is sharp and hard to navigate, and progress has been difficult. The Ottomans just keep coming in their thousands. At times it's so bad we can't rescue the wounded between the gunfire and the shelling, and we can hear them crying out for mercy as the Turks drive through them. In the summer months there was a water shortage. Now, the Turks sullied the wells, leaving corpses to rot in them, which meant we had to keep going back for supplies. We had a quart of water in our flask, but needed to conserve that, and we ended up going for days on drops. It was so bad that if you weren't careful, you could be robbed by one of the other soldiers desperate for a drink. In the beginning, we couldn't spot a Turk at all. They were hidden taking pot shots. Their snipers were well placed on Achi Baba and they were highly trained. So we've learned to muddy our buttons and loopholes not to reflect the light for their sharp shooters to take aim. One of my pals was hit in the leg by a sniper who'd been firing at him from their vantage point for days, but no one could get close to them. When we eventually caught them, we were surprised to find it was a young girl, brazen as anything.
You can't touch me, I'm only 14.
I couldn't help but think of you and Grace, Auntie Caroline, and was glad that it was us that captured her and she was treated with respect.
You're joking me.
Never underestimate a woman, Joe. She can do anything a man can do. She can have a pot cup and a rifle cocked and all the time, a baby resting on her hip.
Oh, now I've heard it all.
If you want to comment, you can come out from behind the newspaper and listen properly. If you don't wish to be involved, then I beg you to stay out.
Podrick straightens his newspaper. Caroline raises the letter again.
You snipe all night, in perpetual battle. It's unnerving, exhausting. You never know exactly where the enemy is. It plays tricks with your mind. He creeps around and you wait, not knowing from which direction he'll strike, expecting a bayonet to impale you when it goes too quiet. And when on guard for close combat, the sudden shock of a shell exploding disorientates your mind completely. Every sense is violated.
Sounds of swimming, splashing, laughter and chants.
A swim helps cool the head and clear the mind. Sometimes it's almost surreal to see the new troops arrive as we bathe in the Aegean.
Poor naive bastards. They're smiling, eager for combat.
Blighters on lighters.
So are you going to tell him, or am I?
No one more than us.
The Turks gave us a few warning shots in fairness.
To be honest, I think they're better off not knowing. Plus, they've yet to have their first fly tea.
No amount of marching's prepared for them for the terrain of baked bodies.
And the flies drinking the saliva from your cracked lips. And the tears from your eyes as you aim at the unseen enemy.
I give him 24 hours before his canteen goes missing.
Oh, just what would I do for a heavy canteen weighing me down? How old do you think that officer is?
21, 22.
They're getting younger each wave. Won't see his 23rd birthday. That's a given.
Well, unless he's smart enough to lose those stripes right quick.
Water feels good today.
Snipers are back on the ridge, though.
If it happens, this is how I like it to go. Not left for dead, waiting to be run through.
Maggot meat.
Fly supper.
What happened when you got separated in the advance? I thought you were a goner.
We had orders to advance on enemy lines, but it barely left our trench when we were met by an onslaught of machine gun fire. I was with that NCO. Anyway, we had to take cover in a shell hole because the new recruits didn't know we were between them and the Turks. So we were taking fire from two directions. We scattered looking for cover. And then the officer goes back to tell him that we were ahead, but told me to hold position, but we were hit by a shell. Men fell around me, stung with shrapnel. Then a second blast hit, and I found myself blown into the Turkish trench. With no hope of escape, not right. I was alone behind enemy lines, with just a round left in me barrel, so I laid low and tried not to breathe. I buried myself under the bodies of dead Turks for covers, waiting for the dark to make me escape.
Jesus Christ, that must have been hell.
Well, that's how it felt. Sure, all I could do was pray. And then as dusk fell, this hum of voices just began to chant as I prayed to God to save me soul.
You praise the Our Father. Shots cease and flies quieten, and then the hum of Muslim prayer rises.
I realised that they were praying to Allah, and as the sun set, I found myself facing away from Mecca and towards my own salvation. I scrambled to the flat and crawled across the ground over the surface cemetery of lacerated limbs, trying not to look into the soulless eyes of them that stared into mine. And all the time I prayed for them, for me, for salvation. Until eventually I found a shell hole deep enough to doss down in.
A new recruit swims over to them.
Can anyone tell me why we're here? I was chatting to my mate and it occurred to me that I don't really know what we're doing here beyond doing my duty to crown and country. I know the objective is to stop the Germans, and I was fine in France where it all made sense, but how is fighting the Turks achieving that?
Well, it's the fight of the empires, isn't it? British Empire versus the Ottoman Empire.
All right, yeah. And the Germans?
Well, they're allies, aren't they? Like, we're allied with Russia and France.
Right, gotcha. What palaver?
It's not for us to worry about, though, is it? We're just pawns in this little game of chess.
I just hope it's our Lord moving the pieces.
You mean rather than theirs? But they do pray every day, right, John?
That's right. But come to think of it, their prayers saved my life.
Hey, like that.
Polite men, 10 minutes.
How worried should I be? I just keep thinking as soon as I lift my head over the ridge, that bullet will blow the brains out.
I wouldn't worry about that.
The weather has turned to snow and ice, and with winds from the Sea of Marmara and Russia, we're finally leaving the wretched peninsula, albeit traumatised by what we're leaving in our wake. So many lads are left behind, buried on the beach or burnt in bonfires. And I feel somewhere between deflation and indifference as we leave it all behind. We had to come up with a plan to distract the Turks from our planned departure, so one of the officers had this brilliant idea to play a game of cricket. So, two teams went to bat for us at Shell Green under shell fire. And for some of the men, I said that game was worth any danger it posed, as it let them feel normal in the midst of war. True sporting heroes clearing the way for their comrades to depart. No. As the weather is cold here, we're dressed in heavy coats along with our packs. We can see the men ahead standing packed together so tight they can't lift their hands, balancing around guns and cannons on the lighter leaving from Souville Point. One of the chaps said they looked like a lot of cattle being dumped on that lighter. No one gives a tinker's cuss whether any of us live or die.
Treated like that after what they've been through. What is the world coming to?
That's war, Carolyn. That's why I didn't want him to go. At least if he fought here for Ireland's liberation, he'd be treated with respect. Have a proper home-cooked meal between battles.
I'm not sure when I'll see you next, but for the moment I'm still in one piece. Please write when you have the chance, and as always I send me fondest wishes to all the family. John.
There's a knock at the door. It's Willie. He's carrying a rifle and an army pack. He leaves them both by the door.
Is it yourself, Willie?
Well, it is Porrick. How are you keeping?
Can't complain.
Although he does try his best. Have you eaten, Willie?
Yeah, I'm grand, thanks.
Would you not put the lad on a nice cup of tea? It's bitter out today.
Actually, a cup of tea will go down nicely.
Thanks. Fine, I can take a hint. I'll make myself scarce.
Carolyn goes to the sink. The men huddle up and talk in whispers.
Listen, Joe. The men asked me to come around and see if you'd be willing to go back out to France. They've secured passage for you on a trailer leaving from Rosslare tomorrow morning.
He'd be honoured. Wouldn't you, lad?
It's not gonna be as easy as last time. The Germans have broken the French front. How will I go unnoticed as an Irish civilian?
That's why you're the right man for the job. You think of all the details. We were thinking the same thing, sure. So, I bought an English uniform for you. Use it to blend in when you're over there. Say you're with the 16th. If you're questioned, like, there's a load of old volunteers from Wexford there in that unit, so say that you're on furlough and you're going to visit your dying father.
Do you think the timing's right enough? It's just the war on the Western Front is heating up.
That's why it's perfect. I can't say what's happening, but timing of this is important, Joe.
He'll do it, will he? Don't you worry.
Go do what, Howard?
Me, ma'am. I'm back off. Out to France.
He'll be back by Easter, Carl. Not to worry.
Well, easy for you to say, Willie. I'll have both of my boys at war in different countries. And at least Maggie gets to see you home for tea each evening.
Leave him alone, Caroline. He's just doing his duty for his country.
Aren't we all, Howard?
Act 2, Scene 1. Annie takes Grandad's diary from the trunk. A couple of letters fall to the floor, and among them, a newspaper clip.
The Easter Rising happened 3 weeks after the Battle of Verdun and 3 months before the Somme. Over 200,000 Irish men had been fighting on different fronts at the time, including 24,000 national volunteers who had enlisted in support of John Redmond's call to secure Home Rule. When rebellion broke out, the Irish were as astonished as the British. Even the rebels were caught by surprise. When a shipment of arms sank off the coast, the volunteers around the country were ordered to stand down. This meant that although the rebels had had the element of surprise on their side, the British troops' attention wasn't split between towns, and their full concentration fell on Dublin. The Irish regiments, yet to deploy to fight the Germans, were called into action to fight their countrymen, but their reluctance to engage meant that troops had to be brought over from England. Fierce fighting broke out from Easter Monday until the following Saturday. Dublin was pommeled with shells and bullets by British troops, while rebels lit fires for cover. The Dublin skyline was reduced to rubble. When James Connolly surrendered, wounded in the GPO, mercenaries came from Ashbourne, Swords, Wexford to confirm his surrender, and all was effectively over. The surviving rebels were marched through the streets of Dublin. Some Dubliners held it with them with rotten veg and denied them for staging a rebellion when their loved ones were still under British command fighting abroad. They felt that their families and their city had been betrayed. But the mood soon shifted when requests for clemency were ignored. And word got out of the rebel executions at Kilmainham jail and of James Connolly, who, due to his injuries, had been brought by stretcher to his own execution. Many considered the English reaction cruel and merciless. But the real change came when British soldiers began to rampage, randomly raiding homes with tenuous connections, creating carnage of complicit and innocent alike, as residents young and old were killed on their own street and in their own homes. This caused a divide among Irish sensibilities, where on one hand, men had gone to war to defend Ireland, and on the other hand, men had banded together to free her. Both now felt betrayed by the other. Scene 3, Carolyn's kitchen. The calendar reads April 28, 1916. Padraig and Carolyn sit at the kitchen table. Padraig pours them both a cup of tea. Carolyn holds a letter in her hand.
I can't open it.
Here. Have a cup of tea. It'll steady your nerves. Go on. I'm here beside you.
She rips open the envelope.
I can't, it's not writing.
Give it here. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Murphy, I regret to inform you that your nephew John Kelly was killed in action during our evacuation of Suvla Bay. He was a brave soldier and a loyal comrade in battle, having on more than one occasion risked his life in defence of others. Unfortunately, his remains and worldly goods cannot be repatriated. But I have said prayers commending his soul into heaven and hope that at least will bring you a little peace. I hope someday we can meet and I will have the opportunity to tell you more of his endeavours. May God bless you all. Father James McCall.
Is that it? No thanks, no medals, no nothing? And his St. Christopher's medal that we gave him for his first Holy Communion, he always won it. Could they not have sent that home?
Mustn't have been possible. Why don't you go up and lay down for a bit? I'll put these away.
Carolyn complies and heads up the stairs. Padraig starts to clear, but breaks down. There's a knock at the door. Padraig composes himself and goes to open it. Two volunteers storm through the door with rifles, wearing scarves and hats to conceal their faces.
Just sit down and don't make any sudden moves. We'll be out of here before you know it.
What do you want?
Your son, Joe, has been off in France for a while now. Seems to have dropped off the radar. Have you heard from him?
No, nothing. But then, nothing's been coming through for the last couple of weeks.
What's this then?
That's another matter.
He picks up the envelope.
Put it down.
The volunteer reads the letter.
Please. It doesn't concern me.
Well, that's where you're wrong. One son gone missing in France, another lost in Suvla Bay. You need to be more careful, Paul.
Joe's not missing. He's gone over on a mission to France, and he's done it before. He's risking his life at the moment, and you have the audacity to come in here and accuse him of doing something untoward. You with your cowardly mask for fear of being recognised. But I know it's you, Willie, who isn't speaking. I'd recognise the squeak of your shoe anywhere.
You tell Joe we have our eye on him, and he'll be answering to us on his return. There's been good men killed in Dublin because the German boat was intercepted, and we think that Joe might know something about it.
Have you lost your mind? He's a kid. A kid who's been doing your gun running at great risk. Why would he betray you?
John did.
Won't you ever speak ill of my nephew in my own house? God rest his soul.
Carolyn comes down the stairs with her rifle.
Get out the pair of you.
Carolyn, don't. You don't know what you're doing.
You know. You're right, Willie. I think I've lost it a bit. And be careful if I were you. I'm feeling very unpredictable.
The volunteer lifts his rifle to take aim. Carolyn shoots, hitting him in the neck. As he falls to the ground, a reflex action causes a shot to discharge. Padraig tumbles to the floor. Carolyn drops her rifle and rushes to his aid.
Padraig!
She takes a cloth from the table and uses it to put pressure on Padraig's chest wound. But it's useless. Padraig is dead. The volunteer reaches out for help. Carolyn stands up and looms over him.
You know, the corroded artery is almost always fatal and needs urgent treatment for any hope of survival. Gunshot wounds to the neck our common injury in the trenches. As men come up over the parapet, they're like sitting ducks in the fairground for snipers to take out, or machine guns to randomly hit without any skill at all. The Turks are good at the bayonet too, sharp and brutal and immediate. And you think you can come into my home and threaten me? You who think you're better than the brave men who run head-on to death traps to ensure the liberty of all? You who sent my son off to do your dirty work? Did you really think that I would let you live after you killed Harry? A fool of a man who supported your cause. The fool of the man I married. The fool of the man I love.
Carolyn goes over to the volunteer who gurgles his last breath.
Carolyn, we need to get out of here. Do you hear me?
I'm not going anywhere with you.
No, you're right. We need to go separately. You need to go wash the blood off your hands. I'll stay and clean up this mess.
Willie leads Carolyn over to the sink and rinses the blood away.
Carolyn, I need you to write a note to say you're going up to Dublin to see Grace and address it to Porrick. Then I need you to go upstairs and pack your bag. Can you do that?
Scene 3. Grace's house, Dublin. The calendar reads April 30th, 1916. Grace calls down to Carolyn from Rose's bedroom.
Would you ever hurry up with that water? How long does it take a kettle to boil? Jesus Christ.
Rose is lying on the bed, writhing from contractions. Carol comes through the door, towels on shoulder, kettle in hand, and fills a basin.
I told you not to tell her about John. You brought this on her. Are we in the middle of a bloody revolution?
Jesus Christ, when the 9 months are up, they're up. The baby decides when they want out, and neither war nor rebellion is going to change that.
I don't want my baby born to the sewing box. I know, Daddy.
What are you waiting for? Will you go and see who it is?
Grace throws Carolyn a rifle.
Here. You might need Maggie.
Yeah, this is going to make them think there's nothing going on here. You know I've sworn.
Go on, would you?
Who's there?
Is that you, Carolyn? It's me, Willie.
What in God's name are you doing here?
Still with the rifle, huh? Some things never change.
He clutches the left side of his stomach.
I told you to stay well away.
I had no choice. The safe house I was in North King Street was raided. It's madness up there. They're using machine guns and kids out on the street. British officers blew a mouse hole from the house next door, and soldiers came in shooting and thrusting their bayonets, and they didn't care if anyone was involved or not. They got away lightly.
Yeah, let me see.
Willie shows Carolyn his wound. Blood has seeped through onto his shirt and is dripping onto the floor.
You're not too bad. Nothing vital. Let's get you cleaned up so you can be on your way.
Carolyn, we need you here. The baby's coming.
Who the blazes is that? Go on out of sight and tell Grace to hide you.
Willie drips blood across the floor as he hurries to hide. Carolyn opens the door, rifle cocked. A British Army officer aims his rifle at her.
Lower your weapon!
Carolyn puts her gun against the chair. The officer searches her.
I don't have any more weapons. That's just from my protection from the rebels. I don't even know how to use it. It's my son's. It wasn't my son's. He died in Gallipoli.
Carolyn shows him a picture of John in uniform.
He fought in the 10th at Suvla Bay.
I'm very sorry for your loss. You haven't seen anyone else come through here?
He notices the blood splattered on the ground.
I haven't.
I'll be on my way then.
Oh, God!
Who's that?
He races in the direction of the noise. Carolyn races behind him.
It's my friend's daughter. She's in labour.
He opens the bedroom door.
What do you think you're doing?
Carolyn's eyes dart around looking for Willie. The sheets on the bed are now saturated with blood.
Do you mind? Can you give her some privacy, please?
Well, I'm very sorry. I was searching for a rebel who was seen running down this road.
Well, there's only one person hiding in this room. And they're about to come out screaming between the legs of my dog.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I understand. I'll be off now.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out now.
The officer goes back to the kitchen, attempts to take the rifle. Carolyn gives him a filthy look.
I'll leave you that for your protection in case the rebel comes by. But don't try to use it. It's complicated and you could hurt yourself.
Sure, I wouldn't even know where to start.
She locks the door and goes back to Rose's room.
Quick, the baby's breached. You're going to have to torn it. I'll keep Rose calm.
Oh, God!
Grace holds her arm and wraps her arm around her head for support, giving her a cloth to bite down on.
Here, bite down on this.
She nods to Carolyn and Carolyn manoeuvres the position of the baby. Rose collapses back down into Grace's arms.
You're doing great, Rose. That's the worst of it over. Your little baby will be with you in no time. Where did you hide Willie?
He's under the bed. He was bleeding. I didn't know where else to hide him.
What in God's name?
Don't forget the rifle.
Willie peeps out from under the bed.
If there's one of ours, don't say I'm here because he cares about with Porrig.
This is ridiculous. I'd like to see a man deal with a war while delivering a baby.
You delivering a baby? A lot of good you've been to us. You've been out of the room more than you've been in it.
Well, it's not my fault you're so blinking cocky.
Excuse me, I'm the one having the baby. A bit of attention wouldn't go astray.
Sorry, love. You're doing great.
You're nearly there, Rose.
I'll have less out of you.
Carolyn picks up the rifle and opens the door. A rebel points a gun at her.
Oh, for God's sake, what do you want?
Put your weapon down. What are you doing with that anyway?
My son's with the volunteers. He's over in France at the moment, getting weapons for ye. He left me this to protect us from the British raids.
Smart man. What's that?
He runs in the direction of Rose's bedroom. He notices blood on the floor.
Are you harbouring someone?
That's just my friend's daughter. She's in labour.
What do you think you're doing?
I should be charging for this.
Do you what? Can you give her some privacy, please?
What? Is she breech?
What is it to you?
When we have heifers about to birth, my dad would always say, when she pushes, put her legs down. Would you like me to give you a hand?
And no.
Are you kidding me? A heifer?
Actually, that's not a bad idea for a cow. My husband was a vet. I'm a nurse myself, so not the best for a
Can you
girl.
please take your niceties elsewhere?
Well, if you don't need me, I'd best be going.
I'll show you out.
The rebel goes to take the rifle.
Nah, you know what? I'm going to leave it with you. But don't go telling anyone I was here.
Scene 4, the Somme, Picardy, France. Joe lies across some sandbags, writing. He's wearing the uniform of the 16th Regiment. Other soldiers rest on either side of him.
Dear ma'am, I say that you and Dad are wondering where I got to. Well, I'm here in France still. When I arrived, things were more complicated than the time before. The French driver refused to drive me to the meeting place, saying it was too dangerous, and sure enough, you could hear the shells bursting in the distance. So I took shelter in a hay barn. Then, after a couple of days, some men of the 16th arrived on furlough, and the strangest thing happened. I recognised some of them from home. Some from the Fintan, others from the Christian Brothers, and a platoon of volunteers, and nobody questioned why I was there, because they already knew. And I heard this cry.
Kate Pat! Is that you?
What's the likelihood?
It was Fiddle, ma'am. Remember him?
Of course I do. Poor bow-legged Fiddle. He'd have been 2 inches taller if his mother hadn't let him walk so young.
I know what you're thinking, but he's taller than any of us now, would you believe?
Teapot? Where'd that come from?
Short and stout.
Seriously?
Well, he was shorter as a kid. Stout was his surname, Murphy.
Right. And the rest of you?
That's now.
Second born twin. Nice to meet you.
And that's Fluke.
He could get out of anything.
He's crosshairs.
He couldn't.
Was always in the brother's sights.
I didn't have it as bad as Galway.
You're telling me? Every time they looked at me, the letter came out. 10 lashes Monday, 20 lashes Tuesday.
Never stop lashing.
So, Teapot, what's your story? You sitting the more out into your tea cosy?
That stung. When they left for the front, I felt sorrowful to be the only man left behind when they went to fight. But I'd received instructions to find another way to get to my contact. Then the French driver told me that he'd been intercepted, and as far as he knew, was in a British gale along with the men who fought in the rebellion. I waited a few days, not knowing what to do next. Some of the men returned from the trenches, carrying stretchers with the wounded in the worst condition imaginable. Limbs blown off, gunshot and shrapnel wounds, all missing parts, and the parts they're missing. The horror reminiscent of an Edgar Allan Poe tale, but there's no raven here, no bird song. The landscape is desolate. Trees have been amputated of branches, and although it's full summer, nothing is in bloom.
Joe and his pals sit in a barn on some haystacks.
I had some food and wine the farmer had left for me way back. So when they had some downtime, I gathered the lads and we sat and ate together in the hayloft.
Fluke still got it. 10 of them went over together. 9 were blown to smithereens and he lost the tip of his little finger. Just enough not to be fit for service.
Thankfully, Crosshairs didn't live up to his name, did you?
Fucking infernal itch. Christ's sake, Crosshairs, you're not allowed to see again. Snap, you shave his head and I pop the little bastard.
No, thanks. I'd take the clothes out to the fire, but you can shave his head. The last time I did it, the live ones took a run for it onto my own head. I don't want to deal with that in the front line.
I'll shave your head for you, Crosshairs. I'm not afraid of a few nicks.
Cause you're half bald as it is. To be fair, your head's not that tasty.
This takes me back to the CBS. Do you remember the tar soap and the heads shaved?
Oh, riddle we were. It's different though. Here the lice feed on the rats who feed on the dead. Remember the soldier we met last time we saw you? He fell in front of me, laying a barbed wire beside me for a week until he bloated. The Jerry's shot gas to prevent the Red Cross getting to the wounded before the rats did, so he found himself a rat's supper.
Needless to say, I felt small, there sitting and waiting in safety while friends my own age spoke so bravely and were ready to sacrifice all. So I went with my gut like you taught me, ma'am, and decided to go on with them. I donned my uniform, and although it was fake, at least I no longer felt like a fraud. The trenches here hold all of the horror expected. Smells, the rot, the constant fear. We do 4 days in the trenches and then rest for a few. And there's a front line and a support about 50 yards from that, and communication trenches in between, through which men move back and forth. So it's like a maze, and you'd need a guide, especially with your sense of direction, man. But the men showed me the ropes. So many officers have been killed at this stage that each supposes I was in the other's platoon. Thousands have died, and it's hard to see any progress. Morale has been low, so they've started giving us a pick-me-up before we go into the trenches. We're lined up and given a drink of a sort of syrup.
That's got some kick.
Better than me uncle's pudding.
Any chance we can get the recipe for back home?
Oh, they're not going to give that out too easily. State secrets, right?
You know, strange and all it seems, it reminds me of a cough syrup my Auntie Grace used to get her cousin to bring back from America.
Oh, I don't know what's in it, but after half an hour or so, the blood starts to fly and I breathe them.
Bouncing off the wall.
You'd be wrecked when you get any downtime. After the acute tension and the blood racing and your heart going 50 to the dozen between the shells and the screaming and the whistle of near-miss bullets. So tired, the men sometimes sleep on their feet. The sandbags give enough comfort for a good sleep under cloud cover when it's warmer, and when we're lucky enough to get it. Just keep your head down, because out in no man's land, there's a boogeyman just waiting to get you.
Fiddle gives him a playful shove off the haystack.
Now watch it! You nearly ruined my letter home.
It's time to pack up. I need to collect the letters for posting. We're falling back in third.
Go around the others first, would you? Just need to finish up.
Fine. I'll give you 10 minutes.
Thanks. That's all you want.
Joe resumes writing.
I'm sorry if I've let you down, Dad, by joining. But I felt duty-bound to do so, and in the end, we're all on the same side, right? Though just the other day when we were marching to the back from the front, a cheer rang out from the French.
Les Anglais?
They cried delightedly, to which I called back, Nous ne sommes pas anglais, nous sommes irlandais.
Hey! Vive les Irlandais!
They called out, Viva la France! I called back proudly. I hope to make you all proud. I've taken an oath to do without favour or affection, malice or ill will. I hope to see you all again in this life, but if not, I'll look for you in the next. Must close now. Fond love to all at the old home. Give my regards to John when you next write. From your ever devoted son, Joe.
Fiddle comes back around for Joe's letter. Joe has fallen asleep on the sandbag with his back to him.
Jesus, I turned my head for a minute. I thought you'd another stanza to write.
Joe doesn't reply. Fiddle gives him a shake.
Tease up, teapot. Come on or I'll miss the post back. Joe, come on, for God's sake.
Fiddle turns Joe over. He has been shot through the sandbag. The left side of his face half removed. He lifts Joe's body to sitting and hugs his dead friend before leaning him back against the sandbag. He carefully slips the St. Christopher's medal from Joe's neck and wipes the blood from it. He gently takes the letter from Joe's hand and folds it, dropping the medal between the folded sheets of paper.
Scene 5. Grandad's room.
Grandad, you won't believe this, but I read recently that that secret of syrup each soldier had been given before entering the trenches was actually cocaine. And it wasn't just the British soldiers high on the stuff. The Germans were equally off their heads. Oh my God, it's quite possible that neither side entered no man's land completely compos mentis.
Annie picks up a book, and the letter falls out.
Oh my God. It's Joe's letter. It's dated July 1916, the Battle of the Somme. I remember you telling me about Joe's letter not making it home until Armistice Day, when his wounded friend Fiddle was shipped back to hospital at Dublin Castle. Carolyn had been stationed, and by sheer coincidence, or by the hands of the angels, she had received it. Scene 6. Rose's bedroom. The calendar reads January 1918. Carolyn comes racing into the room, brandishing 3 envelopes.
Letters have arrived.
Shh, we just got Lizzie down for a nap. Who from?
Well, this one's postmarked Cork, Rose, so that must be Willie. Hang on, this one looks official.
Open the official one first.
Dear Mr. and Mrs. Murphy, it has come to our attention that your son, Joseph Daniel Murphy, was killed in action by enemy fire on August 15th, 1916, at the Battle of the Somme.
We apologise for the length of time it has taken for you to receive this. But we couldn't find a record of Joseph's enlistment and assume it must have been a mix-up somehow at the Irish office. Joseph showed great courage under fire. On one occasion, despite having his gas mask compromised by shrapnel and inhaling phosgene gas, he rescued 2 of his injured comrades from the field. Both of the soldiers lived as a result of his bravery. They've supplied us with written testimonials of Joseph's valour, putting their lives above his own. To honour his heroism, Joseph has been posthumously awarded the gold medal for his gallantry. We do hope that this will in some way ease the pain of his loss. We are indebted for his service in the British Army.
Finally, I know. My little lad, the hero. The last of my McCann.
Rose comes over and hugs Carolyn.
He loved you, you know.
I wanted to love him too, Carolyn. And I did. He's my very best friend in the world.
I know you did, love. Well, he's at peace now. Or as much as he can be with Porrick beside him and John teasing him. Yes, they're all together. Trust.
There'll be some party up there when you go up. I think they'll be desperate for a good meal. Sure, they couldn't boil an egg between them. They'll be asking the Archangel Gabriel for directions to Leo Bordox.
I'm not sure Porrick ever went to Leo Bordox.
But John did. He loved his fish and chips, didn't he, ma'am?
The loss of her family dawns on Carol's face. Grace grips her friend's hand.
Why don't you open Willie's one, Rose? We could do with a bit of good news.
Rose opens the letter.
Dearest Rose.
Oh.
I was hoping to have heard from you by now, but I imagine the baby has you busy day and night. But in truth, I've been out of my mind waiting to know if you'd time to consider my proposal. I know I'm not John, and you will never love me the way you did him. But in our time together, I grew very fond of you, and I feel that we both hold his memory dear, and that in some way binds us. When I was so brutally taken away from you and interred at Frongach, I thought it was the end. But between dreams of our future and what I learned at the University of Revolution, I found the strength to go on. I began to really believe that we will witness the birth of an Irish Free State. And as I listened to the great Michael Collins speak, I am now so convinced that I have been working here in Cork to see him elected into office. So, when our new state dawns, I will be in a position to take care of the 2 of you, should you choose to accept me.
Please think this over carefully.
and
Think of the good life we could have together. I remain your devoted William.
I think we need to turn down the heat.
I hadn't realised it was that serious.
But it isn't, well, at least not for me. He proposed before he left and I turned him down. I had to know though, I mean, you two aren't getting any younger. I don't want to be left alone with Lizzie.
Yes, she's told by the Sophie Rose. She's happy here with her 2 grandmothers.
You don't love him, you can't marry him. You're too hard on you both.
Give it time. There's no rush. We're not going anywhere.
Here. What about the tour letter?
Dear Jesus, this one's from Jerusalem. Who do we know in Jerusalem?
Rose opens the letter carefully.
Dear Auntie Carolyn and Joe.
It can't be.
John sits on a stone wall. He has a turban wrapped around his head and wears his shirt sleeves rolled up.
I'm not sure if this letter will reach you, but I hope it finds you well. I'm sorry not to have been in touch, but I was taken to the hospital in Malta following our departure from the Dardanelles. An Ottoman shell hit the water close to our lighter and sent a lot of us flying. I was fortunate enough to have been dragged out of the water, but was completely disorientated and had to overcome shell shock before I could steady my hand to put pen to paper again.
I am happy to report that I am back in full health and writing to you from the cradle of the earth, Jerusalem. It is a wondrous place to be, and I wish I could share it with you. There is the odd inconvenient snake or the like, but the putties have saved the men's ankle more times than I'd like to think.
I'm here with some very affable Palestinian Arab soldiers who fought alongside us to take Jerusalem back from the Turks. Like us, they'd been promised control of their own land by McCann, the British High Commissioner of Egypt, in exchange for help in the battle, and we found a great deal in common. I'm pleased to say that General Allenby, the Bull, as we call him, guaranteed the security of all the holy sites of the three great religions. He chose to enter the holy city on foot to show respect, and was greeted by Jew and Arab alike with equal gratitude to finally be free of the Ottoman Empire.
Harry rushes up to him.
John, did you hear?
Hear what, Harry?
If you have to say that, you haven't then. You have to hear it from Jimmy. It's the funniest in his accent. Jimmy, he hasn't heard.
Well, I can't swear to it, but you know the way that Allenby was supposed to walk into Jerusalem to meet the Arab leader on the same footing, per se? Well, word has it that cook was out earlier looking for some eggs or such for the breakfast, and he inadvertently walked into Jerusalem. Well, they didn't know what Allenby looks like.
No, go on, you're having me on.
Oh, it's honest.
Seriously.
Well, you can imagine the rest once they realised their mistake. Sure, they had to line up again for Allenby and pretend it never happened.
Did Cook ever get his eggs? Is what I'd like to know.
Well, Allenby had egg on his face, that's for sure.
I wouldn't be too hard on him, Mike. I mean, we had a right easy entrance into the holy city. Almost no resistance from the Turks at all.
Well, that'd be the cigarette.
Cigarettes?
Aye. Right, you did not hear it from me, but I can't swear to it, but as I heard it, Allenby had then dropped cigarettes over the Ottoman lines a few times. They thought our flyers had just gotten their flight course wrong, and they were happy to take advantage of our mistake, so they've been happily smoking players for a while now. So when Allenby organised an accidental drop just before we advanced on Jerusalem, sure they thought nothing of it. Except there weren't the usual cigarettes even they were used to. He had added a little opiate to the blend.
Jeez.
Apt.
Well, looks like he might be the reason we get to see home again.
What's the first thing you're going to do when you get home? A pint of the black stuff?
I just want to see my wife and kids. For the boring life.
Jimmy?
I still need to find a wife.
John?
I don't know if you've had any contact with Rose, but if you do, tell her that I think of her often and I look forward to fulfilling my promise on my return. For now, I wish you the happiest of Christmases from the home of our Lord, and may he keep you all safe and well until my return. My fondest regards.
John.
Colonel, when did you get the news that he had died?
Before Lizzie was born, the late Howard was killed.
I don't understand. Is he alive?
Scene 7. Grandad's bed. Annie takes Grandad's putties from the trunk.
Oh, God. Would you look at the putties? Do you remember the Halloween I used these to dress up as a mummy? We'd been talking about Egypt. That's right. Because Lawrence Arabia had been on and you said...
I knew that chap. Lawrence. He rode with the Arabs. Yeah. Promised that if you rode up against the Turks, they could have an independent Arab state after the war. Of course, didn't know at the time that back home, the British Foreign Secretary had set the ball rolling for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine by issuing the Balfour Declaration. It made little sense at the time, because about 90% of the people who lived there were Arabs. It was a crying shame, really. If only they'd communicated before making promises they couldn't keep.
Like promises that weren't kept for you. There was no home rule when you came home. Mum told me how celebrations of end of the Great War were tainted by cheers and Cheers and taunts from people in the crowd, waving independence flags.
They tried to quell our spirit, but we fought so hard to get back. The demons we carried couldn't be quenched that easily. In 29, thousands of us marched in the Phoenix Park, and a delegate of the Free State government laid a wreath in recognition of our service.
You must have thought that the nightmare was finally over.
Well, we had hope. But then De Valera failed to show up. When the National War Museum was unveiled in 33, his disrespect paved the way for others to do the same. But they said his presence could have unified the country. People on both sides could have stepped outside of the shadows and joined together as one nation.
You know, I have memories of being called names as a child because of a hatred that was 3 generations long, without knowing why.
Annie picks up his 4 medals from the trunk.
I remember when you used to wear those on your jacket.
Remembrance Day. It was celebrated around the world to remember those who had lost their lives. No. To show respect for their bravery and sacrifice. It's different here. Family we lost could only be remembered in private, no public poppies. Not even for the Irish soldiers like Joe, who fought and died in the Great War and never to return. Well, by the time I came home in 1918, I'd been away in the service of my country for 3 years. But I had no idea what to expect. When the troops had arrived back in Britain, there were celebrations, their soldiers were heroes. The dreams we had of us, the anticipation, the joy of coming home. Yeah, before long we were discarded like the uniforms we wore. No longer useful, no longer valid. These medals were a testament to what I'd been through. They were awarded in recognition of my service to my country.
And he puts the medals back into the trunk.
Grandad wanted us to be proud. He deserved as much respect as his peers crossing the pond. But a rising, in Grandad's absence, had seen his sister Irish regiment ordered to round up their countrymen for execution. Traitors.
She closes the trunk.
And so, these men returned to a new Ireland, where another war on home soil was more visceral than distant wars abroad, and where any army he had fought with to defend an enemy had become an enemy. In the new Ireland, where fighting in the Great War went unmentioned, where all the association with their past was erased, where they were shunned, where their stories went untold, and their shell shock went untreated. Some lost their lives by their own hands, while others lost their minds in sanatoriums, but the remaining lost their souls at the bottom of a pint glass.
As down the glen one Easter morn to a city fair rode I. There are lines of marching men in squadrons passed me by. No fight did hum nor battle drum, it stamped its red tattoo. But the Angelus bells o'er the living spell rang out through the foggy dew.
How do you feel when you hear that song?
I remember getting angry one night. Some young lads were in the pub with their guitars, strangling songs. They started to play the Foggy Jew. Didn't even know what it meant. Didn't even know what happened at Suvla Bay. And the idea that we should have stayed at home to fight when we were sent off to fight for Ireland by Redmond. We were sent by priests who told us to defend the poor Belgian nuns from getting raped. We were sent to make sure Ireland would be free of the Kaiser's rule. I mean, they were deluded if they thought we'd be any freer under Germany, but alas, history has been rewritten. So I let loose to those lads. Said that to sing the lyrics 'twas better to die neath an Irish sky than at Sulva or Sudelbar was ignorant and irreverent. I told them that the men they were singing about were good Irishmen who had died appalling deaths, consumed by rats and flies, lying for days decaying in the baking sun, sinking in the mud, shot and run through for good measure by the Turks, loaded on a lighter like cattle to leave and sail halfway across the world to get home, just so they could degrade their memories. Don't you know that we were fighting for Ireland?
It's okay, Grandad. It's over.
Right proudly high over Dublin town, they hung out the flag of war. 'Twas better to die neath an Irish sky than at Suvla or Sudelbar. And from the plains of royal Meath, strong men came hurrying through, while Britannia's sons with their long-range guns sailed in through the Foggy Jew.
The Foggy Jew was written by a priest, Canon O'Neill. Ironically, the priests had sent Irishmen to battle and prayed over John and Willie Redmond's tombs, but forever their sentiments would resound in these lyrics of condemnation for the 210,000 men who answered the call to fight for Ireland. 50,000 Irish soldiers lost their lives fighting in World War I, with countless others returning wounded with serious physical injuries and suffering extreme mental trauma. Bodies were not repatriated, so there were no proper funerals. Often no personal effects were returned. Sent away to cheers and returned to curses. No poppies, medals, or regaling awaiting the Irish veterans of the Great War. Grandad's legacy was confined to shell-shocked commemoration and a polished trunk in a wooden wardrobe.
Annie closes the wardrobe. She goes to the dresser and takes the photo of her grandfather in uniform and puts it into the case.
Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile and maybe tomorrow you'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just
Smile.